Finishing well. I think it's been a big, long year, and most of us are really tired. And I am no exception. So challenge number one is, am I capable of sharing the slides? And I'll be calling on Greg as I
Yes.
stuff things up as we go on. Meanwhile, the first thing I want to do before we even dive in is to remind us that we are each other's environment, that who you are with will always have a much bigger impact on your day than the furniture or the four walls. And what I want to do before we go any further is just to think about who makes work a better place for you. And pop in the chat, who makes work a better place for you? Oh, thank you, Stephen. The rest of the team, my teammates, yeah. And I just think we need to really acknowledge how important these people are. And we don't always, we're so busy that we don't always give ourselves time to think about this. And so at this time of the year, I think it's easy and it's understandable if you cross the finish line bitter and exhausted, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think we talked about this before, Greg, that you can end up being so tired, not noticing the good things, that it's sometime in early January when you're lying on a beach thinking about stuff that you realize there's a lot of people to thank and a lot of people who've done good work through the year. So this session is to allow us to think about those things now on the 1st of December so that we can say the meaningful thank yous to the people who need to be thanked and finish in better shape. So when I think about finishing well, for me, that means finishing with you in one piece. So taking good care of yourself. Self-care needs to ramp up, not down in the next month, but also finishing with relationships intact, not always a given. Finishing with pride and morale high, and with some ideas bubbling for next year, rather than just, running away feeling tired or defeated, to learn from what's really worked well this year and have a little sense of what's going to be important to me. So I want to start with thinking about the first part, which is finishing with you well and what you need to do to take care of yourself for the rest of the year. And let me share again, and then we're just going to chat because you really don't need me talking a lot. So again, it's this thing of just checking, Greg, you can see my slides. You can see finishing well. Oh, we're off. So it is just saying there are opportunities by actually noticing what's gone well, where we and other people have coped well. And it really is worthwhile paying attention to those. And then the first thing we want to talk about for the rest of this year is ruthless prioritization. So we know that one of the strategies that really helps resilience is focusing on the stuff that matters that you can control. But what we're all really aware of is that little bit in the middle isn't a little bit, it's a really big bit. And so we'd say that little bit in the middle needs your ruthless prioritization. And what we're doing at the moment, almost on a daily basis, is getting the to-do list out of your head and onto a page. And then on another page, or on the other side of it, what actually really, really matters. And that should only be 3 or 4 things max in a day. And then it's saying, how can I reduce the load? What's not absolutely essential? What can I postpone, delete, combine, collaborate? We can become crazily busy at this year. And I did say to somebody, does anybody really need to go to another Christmas pageant? Does anybody really need homemade paper in their Christmas cards? It really is time to lower the bar. So we also talk about when you've got your list, how can we be really clear on negotiating new additions to the list? And as leaders, I think the single most important thing we can do for our teams that helps just calm things down a little is to be really clear in our team's priorities. whether as a whole school or as individual departments or syndicates or teams, when people are really clear what's most important and what's allowed fall off the list, we really help people have a little bit of clarity and kind of run the defrag program. And Greg, I don't know if you can pop in the chat. We've been sharing with people 2 contrasting Christmas styles. And it's a little kind of jokey letter that I found a few years ago that I feel is really relevant this year. It's about, you know, are you going to go full Martha Stewart and make everything from scratch and theme the whole house? Or are you going to throw a few things together at the last minute? And I think we need to be really aware of what's absolutely essential and what are we doing that is just making more work for people than we really need right now. Because I think, you know, there's a lot of us that can go a little bit Martha Stewart at this time of year. And it's like, does everybody need another picnic? Does everybody need homemade baking? You know, wrap the plastic off some, pull the plastic off some mince pies and call it done. And I think that's all part of being able to lower the bar, prioritize what's important, lower the bar on what's not, and ask for help if you need it. I think they're all really, really important. And Greg, can we open up or have a chat discussion around what are people going to do? Because most of us know what we need to do to get to the end of this year in the best shape possible. And I'd love you to put in the chat, what's one thing you know will make a difference for your self-care from now till the end of the year? And for me, one of those things is getting out the door, walking away from my desk and getting out the door into some greenery and remembering that. Yeah, and crossing a few things off the list, even if they're not done. Sometimes it's just crossing them off the list. Yep, sleep, exercise, getting outside. Yeah. I love it. And what I want to encourage people to do is to think about keeping self-care really foremost. You know, it's not okay to go, oh yeah, on December 26th, I'll relax. We're not going to keep going and do any good for anyone else unless we can actually show them what self-care and prioritization looks like. I've been getting emails this term from principals who are on sick leave and don't know whether or not they'll come back. And these are people who have really battled to do a good job. And I think we've got to acknowledge what we're doing in our schools. If we are role modeling 90-hour weeks, laying our life down for the cause, that's not, you know, how can we embed well-being in a school where we're at the top modeling that? I think we've got to ask ourselves some hard questions. Greg, thoughts from you? You're looking very pensive.
No, I'm just always pensive there, Denise. Okay. No, I think it's a good point, and I think it is what are those little things you can take, and what are those little decisions you can make, you know. I know I've got 4 lists at the moment that I try to hide, and I'm trying to put all those things onto one list now. And then when they're on one list, I can work out how many things I can actually get done. And I like that idea of that you said, sometimes cross things off even if they're not fully done, you know. It's just like, give yourself a little bit of a break.
It's just like, hello, Denise, can we be a little bit realistic here? That is not happening, you know. Maybe next year, maybe never. I've taken really great pride in crossing stuff off my list, and just actually, full disclosure, I emailed a really lovely colleague at the start of this week to say that article we're writing for that journal, it's not happening. And he went, thank God, I feel exactly the same. You know, the world
I like Judy's comment in the chat, which is ask yourself in a month from now, will it really matter? You know, and some things will, and so we've got to do them.
Yeah.
But will it really? It's like we have this false notion that everything has to be done before Christmas. But why? You know, everything has to be done before we break. But why?
I know, it's like some great big crossing over to the afterlife. We'll all be back next year, so calm down. So if we come on and think about the next part of this, which is, you know, we're all going to finish, but I'm sure to see where we are. The next piece that I want to talk about, if I can actually manage to find anything on my screens, is thinking about finishing with relationships intact. You know, things can get really, really frazzled and really frayed at this time of year. And what I want to think about next is this. It's who stepped up, who surprised you this year, who really had you back, who helped you out, who's been flexible, creative, cheerful, you know, who has kept you going through this year? Who do you really want to recognize and thank? And I think this is a really lovely conversation for staff rooms for the end of the year, because rather than thinking about what we still have to do, let's actually be aware too of what we've done and all the different things that have helped us through the year, people we want to thank. I think we did pop in the chat, and if we haven't, we might pop it in now, a little finishing well review that you're really welcome to share with anyone you like, and to use it personally or to share it with your team or do it together. And in there is space for thinking about finishing well in terms of who are you grateful to and how are you going to let them know. And I think that's really, really important. And so the conversation that I think is interesting to have following on from that is what is it that you can do to take care of and acknowledge the relationships in your school for the rest of the year? And Greg, shall we go to a little bit of, no, let's just go chat on this one and break out on the next one. But when I discussed this with a teacher in Christchurch recently about how can you acknowledge and take care of relationships, the one that jumped out for her was, don't hit reply all. If you really want to say, you know, to look after relationships, think carefully about who needs to be involved in which emails, and just reduce the noise and the traffic that you're sending across people's desks. And I'm flicking right down to say anything else you think is really important. And actually, Greg, can we just let people unmute or put a hand up if you've got an idea that you'd like to share? What's going to help in your school or for you personally to take care of relationships? Kia ora, Janine, and it's okay that your video isn't working.
Yeah, one of the things, Denise, interesting you bring that up, because one of the things we've been doing in another space is we actually talked about love languages, or the way you give and receive love, or aroha or manaki, and recognizing that some of us like the card and the thing. Some of us like sitting down and talking to them face to face. Some of us want the flowers. Some of us, you know, it's the different things we have. And I think talking to a couple of principals is going, be aware of how you give it, but how do your staff receive affirmation? You know, and what does it look like? You know, because you may be giving it in a way that they don't receive it.
Completely.
So therefore, be aware of that. We all have different styles, and that's actually okay. But the importance to be able to know your staff and go, actually writing a whole lot of cards is not the best thing. Actually sit down and have a cup of tea with them at break time. But for others, the card might be right. So
saying, I'll do that photocopying for you. You know, I had a friend who used to visit when I had small babies, and she'd come in through the garden and take the clothes off the line on the way in. Honestly, the aroha, the manaki that I felt from that gesture was massive. And it doesn't have to be magic, and it doesn't have to be guesswork. You can actually say to people, what's one thing that would make you feel supported, valued, and cared for between now and the end of the year? Any small gesture, you know? Yeah.
And just to push the boat out there, Denise, we actually had a group of staff the other day do the 5 languages of love conversation, and that's a bit out there because it's not about love, but it's about affirmation and support.
Yeah.
But it created a conversation to go, actually, don't buy me something, just sit with me and have a cup of tea. Don't just acts of service or
Acts of
whatever it is.
service, or
But it was simply to having those conversations around it, and that gave people a whole lot of freedom to go, I don't have to be what I'm not, which I think is incredibly, which takes the pressure off. And so, looks after yourself, but also looks after the relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we come on to the next aspect of finishing well, for me, it's about finishing with pride in what we've done. And, people are tired because it's been an extraordinary year and people have had to deliver an extraordinary level of support to staff, to students, to the community. And no wonder we're tired, but it's because we have been well used. And so I think it's really important to remind ourselves that, what have you done this year that you're proud of? Cue my favorite slide of an old dog learning new tricks, but thinking about what are you most proud of and what strengths have you shown? And think about that for ourselves, but also these are beautiful questions to ask your team rather than just, has everybody got this sorted and that sorted and what list is ticked? What strengths do you think people in the team have shown? What are you most proud of? These are good conversations for people to be involved in. And I think just to allow people time to think about what they're proud of getting done and what they feel good about. And in that review document that we've shared, it's got space in there for thinking about what you're most proud of. And that's like achievement, effort, support, new skills, or the kind of strengths that really made a difference to you this year. And whether they were new strengths you had to really dig into, or whether they were old ones you were falling back on. I think, and just giving ourselves a little time. So shall we go into a breakout? And what I'd love you to have a chance to discuss is, you've all got stuff you're proud of in yourself and in your teams. But what I want you to think about is, how are you going to share the wins and celebrate as a team? Because that's part of finishing well. I hope you all had a chance to have a bit of a chat. And one of the things that really struck me when we were talking was some of the things that I'm proud about include getting better at setting boundaries. That's not necessarily stuff I can share with my team because being on the other side of the boundary doesn't always feel great. But if there's stuff that you are proud of, you need to celebrate it with your peers, find other principals to share some stuff with, because, sometimes being able to say no to people, being able to push back, being able to set a boundary, being able to not be available might have been your biggest achievement. That needs to be celebrated because that's what's keeping you sane. Something else we were thinking about was, for some of us, our heads are still really in the doing and the surviving. And we actually need to be able to pull back and give ourselves a bit of space to really think of what we're proud of. And if your head doesn't go there straight away, that's okay. And that's what that little review document is for, is, sit down with a cup of tea somewhere on your own when you've got a bit of time. Maybe think about this question on a walk, because it's that thing of, when we think about what's been good and what we're proud of, I think that feeds into the next area we want to talk about, which is the learning from this year, thinking about what worked well and what we've learned. And, there's sometimes the learning has come at a price. Like, I know that my learning on setting boundaries came because I came too close to the fire, and we talk about burnout, we talk about our burnout level. And I would often through the year have been saying, well, I'm definitely a bit crispy around the edges. Well, by October, I was setting off smoke alarms and it was time to stop for a while. It definitely went beyond what was healthy. And so I had to really pull back and ask myself some hard questions. So the thing I'm proudest of and the learning has come from the hardest thing. So the pride and the learning doesn't always come from the successes. Some of our most important learning comes from the painful stuff as well. So on that little review document, there's space there in the top right, on the right-hand side, for thinking about what's worked well and what we want lots more of next year. God, I want lots more clarity and boundary setting next year. And what did I learn from the stuff that didn't go so well? And, and that's going to be different for all of us. And when I think, when we think about those things, it kind of leads us into thinking about, what are we hoping for next year? What's one thing? And this may be a question that you're going to think about when you are at the beach, but what are you hoping for next year? Yeah. What's one thing you really want to make happen? Doesn't have to be big. And it might be really small and really practical, but you go like, I would feel so satisfied to make this happen. Me at the moment, it may include hooks on the back of the bathroom door. It doesn't have to be major. It just might make a difference. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before that, I just wanted to say, when you think about this with your team, in some of our teams, people might not be quite ready to turn their attention to next year. I think there are some people who are still feeling really wobbly and tired. And this is another option. So I think we spoke about this in 2020. This slide is from a wobble room that was, it was a hospital in the Royal Derby, and it had this sign inside it. And it was saying, you're not alone. Kindness will get us through. And I kind of think, ignore number 3, embrace the challenge. You might be too fed up to do that, but we've got to look after each other. And so one of the options that I'm giving people is saying, if you're not ready to think about the future yet, or if your team aren't, maybe it's time for a little wobble room. Maybe it's a wobble stabilizing session to say to people, what do you need to ground you? What do you need to do to feel looked after and a bit more secure before the end of the year? So what I'd love to do is have I've got a slide for you. I think if Stephen can share that one in the breakout room. I'm now flying. It's Greg, you're going to be so proud of me actually learning how to drive Zoom. So this is what I want us to talk about in the breakout is, what are you most proud of and what are you hoping for? And one thing you want to make happen. And then if you think there are people who are too overwhelmed in your school to think about the future, how could you create some kind of wobble support session to just go, let's just slow it right down and think, how are we? Who are we? And what can we do to ground and look after each other to finish the year okay, in good shape? Yeah. Now, I want to wrap up because, do you know, if we could finish 5 minutes early, that's a gift of 5 minutes we can give to each other. And that's a good thing on an afternoon. So what I want to just remind you is that we shared some resources with you this afternoon. And one of them is the letter from Martha Stewart to Irma Bombeck and her reply. And we've been sharing with that in our community Teacher Boost. And it's become its own shared language of saying to people, who's going full Martha? And going full Martha is to taking everything to the nth degree, handmade decorations in your classroom. And we're just saying to people, for God's sake, no one needs to go full Martha this year. Dial it back. And if you want to initiate those kind of discussions in your staff room, print this out and put it on the notice board and see what happens. And then the other thing we've shared with you is the personal review. And actually, what I can do is also, Stephen, I'll share with you a well-being wheel that you can use if you like, to sit down and think about how the year has gone and all the different aspects of it. And they're just ways that maybe will work for you to spend a bit of time either on your own or with other people to take stock, so that you, and the reason for taking stock is to go, I might be tired now, but I've done good work. There's stuff I can be proud of, because out of paying attention to the good stuff comes the commitment and the ideas for next year. It's very hard to move forward coherently unless we've given ourselves some time to really take stock, appreciate and evaluate. So I'd really encourage you to give yourself a little bit of time for that. Yeah. And then I am going to say, yeah, prioritize together, keep it real. For God's sake, don't overachieve. And share that Christmas letter with your colleagues.